Let's take a look at some information and charts on Polkadot for Brave New Coin. So Polkadot is a separate chain that has parachains, KSM, and the like. Other than that, not too much going on just yet. With Polkadot still in the incubator early stages, it is proof of stake. They use a unique consensus mechanism, Babe Grandpa. You'd have to dig deeper into that if you're interested. But from an analysis perspective, we don't have DeFi numbers to look at. We don't have dApps to look at. I can look at some on-chain stuff. I could look at KSM or other parachains. But in general, there just isn't much to say on the fundamental side of things other than sort of parrot what the blogs are saying from them or their propaganda on their website, right? Not saying this can't become something amazing. It's too early, I think, to really know what this is going to become. This could be an ETH competitor eventually. We'll see when ETH 2.0 rolls out. We'll see after the Polkadot distribution is further down the line as far as supply is concerned. There's just not enough yet. You know, they got listed at the right place, right time in late 2020, right before all the DeFi stuff popped off. And they were definitely included in price lifting off with all the other DeFi coins. So it's definitely one to watch as like DeFi adjacent if you think DeFi is just mainly ETH. But other than that, not really too much to say. I mean, we can look at the supply schedule and you can see that, you know, there's basically 1 billion tokens that are in circulation by the looks of it, whether it be vested in some way or on some release schedule, I don't know. But if you're buying at these levels, you're likely buying at several multiples more than any of the VCs who got in, any of the investors, right? You know, I look at this investor page and I see the same people that I see everywhere for the most part, Polychain, Three Arrows, etc. And that doesn't give me a great feeling for any of this stuff on the initial listing because it takes time for these investors to sell their stash, should it be vested or otherwise. So that's always something to consider. But as long as it's lumped in with everything else, much like BAT that I talked about earlier today, if it's adopted into the DeFi fold, it's kind of not going anywhere. It's just too early to really understand like what price DOT should be if I'm not looking at technicals. Based on fundamentals, we can look at on-chain stuff. Like I said, the transaction counts are basically flat since the beginning of the year. Average transaction values declining since May. So it's not like any of that is outright bullish. What is pretty bullish is active addresses increasing to all-time highs. This could be a function of the proof of stake. When I look at Tezos and, you know, I can pull that up. Tezos looks incredibly bullish based on active addresses, has always kind of looked super bullish based on active addresses, but most of this, in my opinion, is probably proof of stake related. So proof of stake rewards, which is why you see these random spikes. If we take off the averages, it's certainly not as bullish, but you are seeing more and more people staking, right? And that could be the same case with DOT, where you're seeing more staking occur or stuff, right? Like I don't know enough about DOT. I don't even know where to get the information to dig deeper about DOT. It's just that new, right? 25,000 active addresses. NVT is increasing from lows. NVT is an inverse metric of economic utility, so you want that to be low and declining. It says there's a lot of on-chain activity relative to market cap. So if on-chain activity is declining and market cap is flat or rising, NFT will rise with it. So it's telling you, be careful up here. Things are getting increasingly overvalued relative to on-chain activity. Another way to look at that is MVRV, and we don't have enough data really to really say what's going on here. MVRV's basically declined continuously since late 2020, and it didn't really make any sense at the highs. Ideally, MVRV kind of tops out at 2+ for most coins, but usually it's around 2, so that means that the market cap is 2 times the on-chain activity, the realized market cap, and usually at that point, that represents a top in the market. So you can see here, you had rising prices on declining MVRV. Maybe that's some sort of divergence, but definitely a bit weird and also dependent on how on-chain activity is interpreted on all these different chains. So it's really just, it's too early to kind of look at any of that stuff. We can look at Google Trends, which peaked in February and have been declining since and are slowly starting to increase again. So if you got some information, viewers, on Polkadot that I can look at to dig a little deeper here, let me know in the comments. But we'll take a look at technicals because what else do you look at, right? It's a new chain. It's sort of an ETH competitor. It's by an ETH co-creator, Gavin Wood, who is also a part of Parity Technologies, who also had a multi-sig get hacked basically and funds got locked. So you have all this baggage with ETH-related stuff and ICO-related stuff. And at what point does that not matter? I don't know. For most people, they probably don't even care. They're probably just looking at, is price going up or down, right? So early on, when this thing got listed, it did the right things in that we had this curvature with a inverted head and shoulders along with all of DeFi. And then it took off from there. Head and shoulders at the top, along with most of DeFi, sold off significantly from 50 to 10 basically. And now we're working on this bullish cross on the 12-hour very soon here. So this thing V-bottomed very quickly along with everything else. And a reasonable expectation here is that it just goes back to the previous support turned resistance at 30. So 20 to 30 is a decent trade. It was certainly at the risk when this thing sold off that it was going to be sold off down to sub 7 at some previous resistance turn support. But you kind of got your three drives here, even though you didn't really have a bullish divergence at the end. You had a bullish divergence midway through, and eventually, the selling just stopped, right? Followed everything else, where we just pulled a 180 in like a week, and then all of a sudden, it's like nothing ever happened. But overall, it looks bullish to me for near term. On the daily cloud, looks like it's headed to 30 as well, based on that cloud level. So there's a 50% retracement at 30, which is why it gets painted like this from the high to the low. You will eventually trigger an edge-to-edge trade, most likely. What you're looking for here is a bullish TK cross with price inside of the cloud. And if you want to cheat that a little bit, you can watch it on the 12-hour where you already have a bullish Kumo breakout, but you do not have a bullish cloud. So you're waiting for that bullish cloud to tell you that it's okay to be long again, much like down here into that inverted head and shoulders, which looked like nothing at the time, right? They don't always have to look amazing. They don't have to look real. You don't have to even care about chart patterns, but it was above the cloud. You did get this triple bottom characteristic of bullish reversal, and where it went isn't as important as what it looked like on the initial entry. So we don't look like we did here, certainly, but this is a trend reversal based on the cloud and based on the 5200 cross eventually in the next week or two. On .BTC, things look also bullish in that we're seeing potential for a 5200 cross into volume resistance here at 50k sats. Again, not a lot of history here. I would watch for divergences. RSI spiked really hard, so any higher high here, you're probably going to see a bearish divergence. And in general, this chart's just been a mess since it got listed. You can see the distribution, early investors kind of selling, which is most likely what this represents, into DeFi season. And so we're probably not going to see the downward trend for months like we did in the early listing, but it certainly doesn't look as bullish as the USD chart and then the .ETH chart. I'm just painting bull divs on here. .ETH looks like it has no bottom, right? Like this thing is pretty far away from the 200-day moving average on the 12-hour, has been bearish since April. And unless DOT starts to absorb DeFi, NFTs, ICOs, I don't even know, like whatever ETH is doing, DOT needs to do it better, right? Whatever ETH is doing, all these other chains need to do in a slightly better way, or at the very least, grab market share from ETH through fees or something, right? If ETH is a successful layer 2, has successful layer 2 implementation, then things like DOT become less attractive to anybody because then the incentive to move elsewhere just isn't there. So that's certainly something to think about when you're trading these pairs. What is the market trying to tell you here? And it looks very much like DOT came on hot and heavy early on, but then people realized, stuff's not really happening there yet. That might change, but it's not happening there yet. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETH-BTC fund and DeFi portfolio I trade for Techemy Capital on Enzyme.finance, non-custodial portfolio management tool where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. You can see AUM, performance, allocation, all of the DeFi coins I am trading, all of the yield stuff I'm into, and you can see all the trades, the amounts, when I do what. You can see deposits and withdrawals as well. Like this, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.